Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to All Souls Church, Unitarian-Universalist. I am Kirsten Levitt, and I'm delighted to be your worship host this morning. We welcome Bruce Pollack-Johnson to our service today. Bruce grew up in a suburb of Boston, studied sociology and education at Brandeis University, and earned a Ph.D. in operations research from the University of Pennsylvania with a dissertation about educational planning. He was a professor at Oberlin College in the 80s and then moved to the Philadelphia area as a professor in the Department of Mathematical Sciences at Villanova University, where there is an active peace and justice education program, and where he is now tenured. Bruce has created a course for undergraduate students called Math and Fairness, and a research seminar for upper level math and statistics majors called Math and Social Justice, both of which count for peace and justice credit. He's also on the diversity, equity, and inclusion committees of his department and of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. Bruce is currently moderator and chair of the Justice Council at the UUs of Mt. Airy, formerly Restoration in Philadelphia, which led civil rights work against blockbusting in the 60s, and in 2017 was the first UU congregation to pass the 8th principle, which Bruce co-wrote with Paula Cole Jones. Bruce can often be found singing at protests and rallies in Philly and at weekly Black Lives Matters vigils. Restoration has held since 2014. So thank you so much, Bruce, for being with us here today.
Thank you.
We have the joy of coming together today, and we want to make sure that everyone feels welcome here. So please turn on your cameras for a minute and welcome and greet those who are with us this morning. In any way you all want to.
Hello.
Hi, Russ.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, Lori.
Good morning, Lori from afar.
Good morning, Lori. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Bruce. Good morning, Kirsten.
Hey, Rob. Don't see your face yet, but I hear your voice.
I can't actually tell if I'm seen or not, but glad to be here.
Is that
Yeah,
Ellen?
I can see you, Ellen.
Good morning,
Okay, I
Ellen.
can't see myself. I'm on my phone. I am going to turn this off though. And I'm running out with my dog, but I'm paying good attention.
Okay. Kirsten, should we mute after this greeting now?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm just about to say thank you, and will you all mute? If this is your first visit here and you'd like us to contact you, drop your contact information in the chat. We'll send you our weekly service information and monthly newsletter. We're grateful to have all of you here online with us today. Are there any announcements this morning? I'm going to stop the share so I can see you. Are there any announcements?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody the Social Justice Committee meets next week, Sunday at noon. Hope you all can join us. Thank you.
And I'll remind you all that we resume in-person services next week. And so bring your mask, bring your smile. We'll have snacks outside after the service. And we're looking forward to seeing you all. Pam Kelly, I see your hand up for an announcement. You're muted, dear.
Another announcement to say that the Interfaith Council will be holding Earth Day at the Energy Park on April 22nd, 4:30 to 6 o'clock, and it looks like it's going to be a great program. Woo! So, it'll be our friend Annie Hassett singing, but then also Morris dancing. It'll be a real celebration, good for kids. So hope you can come. And a week later will be followed by Arbor Day.
Terrific. Thank you so much for that. Joan?
Good morning, everyone. Bell ringing. Well, if anybody's interested, you can give me a call at home at 413-531-2637. That's to raise awareness for climate change, 11th hour. And we will be ringing for 11 minutes on April 11th. Thank you.
Terrific. And will you drop that information in the chat as well, Joan? Thank you.
I will.
Okay, and I just want to remind you all that you can send your annual pledge payments or your donations to All Souls. And I'm going to share the screen again so you can see it. To our PO box, or you can make your payments on PayPal. And now I invite everyone to breathe deeply, come into this room, be present, be focused, be at peace. In the words of the Reverend Kathleen McTeague, we come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see communion. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence here together. Here is our, you know what? I don't think I optimized this. Hang on just a second, friends. Technical glitches. I did. Okay. And now this morning's prelude.
That was you recording. John Weldon, Johnson. Okay, looks like somebody else. Lift every voice and sing.
Okay, so now,
Well-
as Molly reads the chalice lighting, I will light a chalice.
May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers, to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom.
And then I would love us to read our congregational covenant together. However, I'm going to ask you all to mute because the minute your voices come across, we have all this echo chamber thing that happens. So I'll read and you read with me, but please mute. In this house, we covenant with one another to create a community built on a foundation of love, to work together to promote equity, justice, and peace, accepting responsibility for our individual acts, to stand on the side of love, embracing the liberation of oppressed minorities, and working to end discrimination and unjust privilege, to communicate with kindness and support, and to serve with compassion and commitment, to listen respectfully and value our diversity as a source of our collective strength, to learn and grow together, generously sharing our time, talents, and treasures, to celebrate the joys of discovery from the wonder of youth to the wisdom of age, to openly share our laughter and our tears, showing reverence for the divine in all that is. And now Bruce is gonna lead us in song. Take it away, Bruce.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So this is in the hymnal number 153, Negro Spiritual, woke up this morning, also a civil rights song. The way I do it is slightly different. I don't know if the words you have are slightly different, but all versions are very similar. So, oh, I woke up this morning with my mind it was staying on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind it was stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind it was stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah. I was walking and talking with my mind was stayed on freedom. Walking and
He's loud.
Somebody needs to mute. Okay, Bruce.
Ow.
Here's your reading this morning.
All right.
Lucy, stop.
Be right with you. Okay, the reading is from Mark Morrison Reed, The Task of the Religious Community. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed.
Awesome.
All right, so good morning, All Souls UU Church of Greenfield, Massachusetts. I'd like to thank Molly for inviting me to speak with you today. I've enjoyed getting to know her as we organized today's service. I also want to give a shout out to my fellow juggler and musician, Rob Peck, who's a member of your congregation. We both enjoyed a couple of gatherings of the People's Music Network for Songs of Freedom and Struggle in Greenfield a number of years ago. Thank you all for being here. My name is Bruce Pollack-Johnson. My pronouns are he and him. My home in Philadelphia sits on the unceded land of the Lenni Lenape Nation. I'm a cisgender, straight, mentally and mostly physically able-bodied, tall, thin, older, educated, middle-class, European American man who has been racialized as white by our society. Virtually all of these identities give me more privilege and access to power than those with marginalized identities that do not yet have the same access to that power and privilege. I've tried to leverage my power and privilege to dismantle and redesign the systemic structures that have created these inequalities of resources, opportunities, and power. For example, my partner Linda and I decided to hyphenate our last names when we got married, symbolizing the connection of two equal individuals. And we gave our kids the last name of Paulson, Paul from her family name Pollack, and son from my family name Johnson, using the genetic metaphor of each parent contributing a piece of who their children are to encourage systems that are non-sexist and sustainable. I'd like to start my remarks today with a simple metaphor. Suppose you were invited to a dinner, and as everyone sat down to their assigned seats, you saw the nice dinner set out for each person, with shrimp and chocolate dipped strawberries and lots of wonderful things. Suddenly, someone walks in and starts taking individual shrimp and strawberries from the people of color at the table and gives them to the European Americans. Surely you would immediately speak up and stop this blatant unfairness and racism. Now imagine the second scenario. The situation is the same, but this time the redistribution has occurred before everyone arrived. Would you notice? Would you say or do anything? Systemic racism, like other oppressions, carries power largely because it is invisible to those who benefit from it, like in my second scenario. Part of my goal today is to metaphorically show you the video of the redistribution that occurred before we arrived. Unitarianism and Universalism, as we know them, were largely formed in the late 1700s, right around the same time as the United States of America. And so the racism of our Constitution and society was baked into each of them. Unitarianism had origins in Transylvania, Poland, and England, and focused on components like believing Jesus was a human being, the importance of freedom of conscience and reason, and rejection of the ideas of original sin and the infallibility of the Bible. Universalism, on the other hand, did not believe that people could end up in hell and believed in an immortal soul, universal love, and working toward building the kingdom of heaven on earth. I like the following simplified comparison, that Unitarians believed that man, yes, typically expressed in that sexist manner, that man was too good to go to hell, and Universalists believed that God was too good to send man to hell. Yes, also expressed in sexist form. I think of the Unitarians as elite, well-educated thinkers and individualists, and the Universalists as more working class spiritual folks with good hearts and more of a community orientation. Part of the brilliance of Unitarian Universalism, the merger of these two faiths, is recognizing the importance of balance of both the head and the heart in this life. When Europeans first came to this continent, slavery existed in many forms. In this country, usually as indentured servitude, which generally meant servitude for a certain period of time or until a debt was paid off. But it originally had no connection to the color of a person's skin. In the 1600s, there were a number of uprisings, especially Bacon's Rebellion, where indentured servants of European and African descent worked together against bad working conditions imposed by the elites they served. The elites saw how this endangered their own power, and so they devised a brilliant scheme to divide and conquer these two groups. They invented the concept of whiteness, related to the color of one's skin, and gave the poor folks defined to be white power to control those defined to not be white, as overseers or enforcers. They pushed the idea that those with darker skin were not equal human beings to whites, or not human beings at all, and therefore cruelty was justified and encouraged. Even though their conditions may have been worse for these poor whites compared to before, they received the psychological benefit of feeling superior, and that was enough to keep them from cooperating with those they actually had more in common with. Before long, servitude was defined by one's race, this social construction based on skin color, in the form of chattel slavery. Those who were enslaved were the property, of their enslavers forever, and so were their children. Laws were passed that any white person could injure, rape, or kill any so-called Negro, and could not be prosecuted or punished in any way for it. Because enslavement was inherited, the slave trade could be ended without ending the institution of slavery, since an enslaver could rape an enslaved woman and the resulting children would also be enslaved. This system of enslavement and forced labor built the wealth of these elites, as well as farmers and businesses in the North and elsewhere, and built the wealth of our country to eventually surpass that of all others. Thomas Jefferson, who many of us claim as a UU, had great ideas about equality, mostly limited to wealthy white men with land, of course, but he did not consider Africans to be equal human beings to Europeans, although he wasn't sure whether Native Americans were or not. And despite saying that he would like to free his own slaves, he never did free them. And most would say that his siring of children with Sally Hemings could not be described as anything but rape. Some Unitarians and Universalists supported the abolition of slavery, although not necessarily believing in racial equality. But others were on the wrong side of history. After emancipation, chattel slavery was ended, and some progress was made during Reconstruction, but this was soon replaced by the Jim Crow system, whose effect was very similar to enslavement and strengthened the idea and culture of white supremacy. Even the New Deal, Social Security, and the GI Bill, while helping millions of Americans, did not provide the same benefits to people of color that it did to white families. Systemic racism was built into all of them. Almost all Unitarians and Universalists did not welcome African Americans as ministers or even members in many places well into the 20th century. And both denominations were active in and supportive of the eugenics movement, which contributed to Hitler's atrocities and tried to justify systemic racism. However, during the civil rights movement, things began to change, and many UUs were moved to build relationships with civil rights organizations, and then heeded the call to come to Selma after Bloody Sunday. UUs James Reeb and Viola Liuzzo were among the martyrs of the civil rights movement. Around this time, many African Americans joined UU congregations when they saw that UUs were walking the talk. Later in the 1960s, however, many Black Americans shifted their focus away from the explicit nonviolence of Martin Luther King, especially after his assassination, toward the Black Power movement, heavily influenced by Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael or Kwame Ture, and the Black Panthers. Some UUs were supportive of this shift, and a group called the Black Affairs Council, or BAC, was created to fund Black-initiated projects in Black neighborhoods, organized by the Black UU Caucus, or BUCK, and supported by a group of white allies called Fullback. The story is very complicated. The quick summary is that the General Assembly, GA, voted in 1968 to fund BAC at $250,000 per year for 4 years, seen as a kind of reparations. But after 1 year of funding, a financial crisis was discovered in the UUA, and no more funding was given after that first year. I call this the Black empowerment betrayal, and after it, many hundreds of Black UUs left the denomination. This crisis was so contentious that there was little racial justice work for a couple of decades in the UUA. Meanwhile, the Jim Crow system that was toppled by the civil rights movement, after some years of good progress, morphed into the war on drugs, the system of mass incarceration, and the school to prison pipeline, what Michelle Alexander has called the new Jim Crow. After the video of the beating of Rodney King, however, in the 1990s, a new movement for racial justice started to build, ending in a number of GA resolutions to become an anti-racist, anti-oppression, multicultural organization. The Journey Toward Wholeness program was created, which included developing the Jubilee anti-racism workshops with Crossroads, providing a common analysis and understanding of systemic racism for thousands of UUs. GAs and other meetings included process observations and right relations teams to hold ourselves accountable and deal with racist comments and actions. We had our first African-American president, and a lot of progress ensued. Sadly, a few years into the new millennium, the commitment to anti-racism waned. Funding for Jubilee workshops ended, and there was a shift in the direction of a much watered down multicultural competence approach. In 2013, Paula Cole Jones, an African-American racial justice consultant and staff person with the UUA, shared an observation with me. She said she had noticed that in her work with UU congregations, there were two categories of congregations, what she characterized as 7 principles congregations and beloved community congregations. The problem in her mind was that many UUs felt that they were living by the 7 principles, but they were totally oblivious to systemic racism. She said, maybe what we need is another principle. Well, I'm the kind of person that responds immediately to a challenge like that. So I stayed up late that night and wrote out an early draft of the 8th principle. I shared it with her. We revised it together, then worked out a final revision with a post-Jubilee support group we were co-leading at the time. The result was the 8th principle as we know it today, And I'm going to give you a visual here. Can you see that? So the beginning is just a preamble of all the principles we, the member congregations of the Unitarian-Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote. Now here's the 8th principle. Journeying toward spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. I immediately proposed that my congregation adopt it as a principle. But at that point, we decided to add the language to our existing congregational covenant in 2014. Later that year in August, in response to the uprising in Ferguson, our congregation started a weekly Black Lives Matter vigil and hung up a Black Lives Matter banner. Participants in the vigil spend half an hour with signs on the street, then light candles and share readings, songs, and racial justice concerns and history. As many of you know, in 2017, the president of the UUA voluntarily resigned in response to charges of systemic racial bias and insensitivity, even though he himself was Latino, related to hiring practices in the UUA. This crisis led to the formation of the Commission on Institutional Change by our 3 African-American co-presidents after the resignation and our co-moderator team that included trans folks and people of color. Congregations around the country held white supremacy teach-ins. My congregation responded by adopting the 8th principle overwhelmingly, the first to adopt it, and formed an 8th principle team to implement it. Black Lives of UUism, Blue, immediately endorsed it, and Honolulu and All Souls, DC adopted it soon after. That summer at GA, Paula and I introduced the 8th principle as a responsive resolution, and it passed overwhelmingly. This should have led to the formation of an Article 2 commission to consider the 8th principle and other possible changes to the principle's purposes and sources immediately. But I think the UUA board decided to let the Commission on Institutional Change finish its work before creating that Article 2 commission. That report, released in 2020 from the Commission on Institutional Change, which you may have heard called Widening the Circle of Concern, after deeply studying systemic racism in the UUA and making recommendations about how to dismantle it, both in the congregations and at the national UUA level. That summer, the Article 2 Commission was formed, and they are hard at work now, aiming to bring a proposal to GA in 2023. In the meantime, the number of congregations who have adopted the 8th principle was about 30 a year ago, and it's now over 150 out of a total of 1,000 congregations in the country, including a few UU groups like UU Ministry for the Earth. Why is the 8th principle so important to so many UUs? In the middle of the 20th century, UUism tended to focus on individual freedom and reason. The 7th principle, adopted in 1985 about the interdependent web of life of which we are a part, brought more focus on the importance of relationships, gender, and the environment, reflecting a higher level of consciousness in those areas at that moment in history. In a similar way, the 8th principle recognizes the development of a higher level of consciousness related to systemic racism and other repressions since the 1990s. The resolutions that were passed at the time were not enough to sustain our commitment. Adding it as a principle is the way to make it ever present in the minds of all UUs, to show our true commitment, to walk the talk, and to hold ourselves and each other accountable to that commitment. Once a month, Paula and I hold gatherings on Zoom of what we call the 8th Principle Learning Community. For over a year, there have been a couple of hundred UUs on each call, learning from each other, sharing experiences and lessons learned. We have seen how adopting the 8th principle is so meaningful to people of color in a congregation and to young folks who otherwise would be inclined to not bother getting involved in a spiritual community. It is a way of helping us free our movement from its narrow Eurocentric and Christian roots to something much more powerful and universal that is appealing to so many people. There's a very good chance that all of the components of the eighth principle will be included in the proposal by the Article 2 Commission, and that it will be adopted. Last year at GA, we proposed a second responsive resolution to affirm that the essential concepts of the eighth principle be included in the new proposed principles specifically, as opposed to the purposes and sources, which again passed overwhelmingly, since that's what people really pay attention to. But some of the most meaningful work comes from each congregation looking at itself and thinking deeply about how white supremacy culture has inevitably penetrated the way we do things, and making a commitment to doing the work needed to dismantle that embedded systemic racism. My personal goal is to have almost all of our congregations adopt the eighth principle before the GA vote in 2023. Then the national vote will have deep meaning, and we will have truly transformed ourselves. Theologically, there's been a movement in UUism from individual freedom to collective liberation. Many of us talk about beloved community as our vision for where we want to go. We talk about the importance of love, but that word is not yet contained in our principles. Spiritually, racism and other oppressions damage the souls of all of us, both the oppressed and the oppressor. Knowing we have benefited from something we do not deserve is painful and damages our soul. If we want to become whole spiritually, we need to do this work to repair that injustice. The eighth principle focuses on racism because that has been the source of our two major crises as a denomination. Theologian James Cone has called racism America's original sin. We UUs don't believe in sin, but we can understand his point. At the same time, similar dynamics can affect LGBTQIA+ folks, people with disabilities, women, and many other groups. We want to work toward beloved community where every person feels at home, accepted, and loved for who they are at their core. Our music, habits, and cultural awareness can have a huge effect. The eighth principle is a beacon, helping us see the path toward this goal. The Widening the Circle report is an initial roadmap of ways to get there. Now that I have shown you the video of the redistribution that occurred before we got to the dinner table, I trust that you will be moved to do something about that injustice. Don't get stuck in guilt. Guilt is simply awareness without action. The remedy is simple: take action. We all have been tainted by decades of socialization in a racist society. It's time to do something about it. I hope that all of you at All Souls UU Church of Greenfield will think about and discuss the implications of adopting the eighth principle deeply. I wish you well in your journey, and I'm happy to be helpful in any way I can. May it be so. And we're going to move right into a song by Charlie King, who I think probably many of you know since he lives in Shelburne Falls. I know Rob knows him. And I think Kirsten is going to put the chorus to this in the chat if you want to try to join in. It's called There Is a Wall. And it was originally written at the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall, but to me, that has almost nothing to do with the power of the song, because it's about all the different kinds of walls that we've erected between people, whether it's economic, related to identity, personal, all the different kinds. And I love it that this song touches on all of them. There is a wall, and it's the tallest wall of all. They named a street for it, where numbers rule and eyes go blank, a wall of gold. They buy the future with the past, they call it work. Seems more like money in the bank. And way down at the foot of that wall, where the guards can barely see at all, a woman is standing, not asking, not demanding. A poor woman is standing with a hammer in her hand. Don't you want a piece of that wall when it comes down? Don't you want to live to see it fall when it comes round? When that wall is gone, no matter which side you were on, can you say you took a piece of that wall down? Don't you want a piece of that wall? There is a wall, and it's the meanest wall of all, stretched from my doorstep straight back to 1492. It hides the settlements, it hides the ovens, the reservations, pink triangles, passbooks, shackles, and tattoos. And way down at the foot of that wall, where the guards can barely see him at all, an old man is standing, not asking, not demanding. An old black man is standing with a hammer in his hand. Don't you want a piece of that wall when it comes down? Don't you want to live to see it fall when it comes round? When that wall is gone, no matter which side you were on, couldn't you say you took a piece of that wall down? Don't you want a piece of that wall? There is a wall, and it's the oldest wall of all, a wall of fear. Holds danger out, desire in, a wall that bristles. Each time the warden brings back tales, inside we're starving. We make the bricks to build the cells, to bury love, to bar the door, to ban the stranger. And way down at the foot of that wall, where the guards can barely see at all, a stranger is standing, not asking, not demanding. A stranger is standing with a hammer for your hand. Don't you want a piece of that wall when it comes down? Don't you want to live to see it fall when it comes round? When that wall is gone, no matter which side you were on, will you say you took a piece of that wall? Don't you want a piece of that wall? Yes, we want a piece of that wall when it comes down. Yes, we want to live to see it fall when it comes round. When that wall is gone, no matter which side we were on, we will say we took a piece of that wall down. Yes, we want a piece of that wall.
Whew. Powerful, powerful stuff. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that the timeline too. And so now I will move us into joys and concerns. My dear friends, now is the time in our service for sharing joys and sorrows. If you have a sorrow that needs the help of this community to carry it, or a joy so great that it will lift all of our hearts, now is the time to share it. You may share with all of us by just unmuting try to be sensitive. If somebody's already talking, wait to unmute. I just want to note, this is not a time for personal or political announcements. We had announcement time, and we'll be together after the service to talk about those wonderful things. It's a time for personal sharing that you want to share with us, the congregation. So it's a great joy to have visitors with us. If you're a visitor for the first time and you'd like to introduce yourself, please feel free to do that now. It's not required, but we do want to welcome you to our congregation. Anyone have joy or sorrow to share? Ellen?
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone that stepped in and helped me when I was injured. And I'm just so grateful for the good feelings and warmth that were sent to me. And especially Joan, who actually, oh, there goes my dog, having her words. Anyway, I'm feeling better, I'm healing, and it's been it was kind of a shock, but shush, be good dog. Oh, and so thank you, everyone. Anyway.
Other joys or sorrows to share?
Yes, I will ask you metaphorically to light a candle of sorrow and thankfully two of joy. The sorrow, I'll try to say this obliquely, is that if a Black man steps out of line in a public way, there's an incredible furor, rightly or wrongly, that there's demands for consequences for the actions. And if a powerful, particularly political white person does something, I think, way more of a slap in the face to his own country, seems to be really hard to have those same amounts of consequences. And that to me is just a glaring sign of the continuing inequity. My joy is that it's wonderful to be reconnected with you, Bruce, even through the, telepathic wavelength of Zoom. So glad you're doing this work. It fills my heart with joy to know that you've continued to explore, and not just explore, but to take action. That seems to be the theme of Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, is not just principles, but policies and actions. And finally, my sweetheart, Debka, who has been in Argentina for over a month, got COVID and looked like she was going to be in Argentina indefinitely, and then mercifully got a negative test. For a guy who believes in positivity, I've never been so happy for a negative result.
Wow. Other joys and concerns?
My name's Russ, and my personal both joy and concern is, as I'm taking more time and learning more how to manage my diabetes, while I'm having more success than I had a week ago at this time, it's not consistent. It's time consuming. It's so much mental energy, and any good thoughts that people can send, I appreciate. Thank you.
Other joys or sorrows?
Molly?
Molly?
Yes, I'd like to light a candle of concern. My older daughter, Essie, was recently in Copenhagen at a film festival. And unfortunately, she brought back something that none of us want. She has COVID. and is dealing with that, but they're getting her the antiviral medication. So hopefully that will help.
And it seems like Essie's with us.
Yes, Essie is with us, and I wanted to celebrate Essie. And there are other people too, Ulysses and Robin, but Essie, welcome.
Other joys or concerns? Carlin? You're muted, honey.
I'm just having trouble finding words. I don't think I'm muted.
Oh.
I'm so moved by your message, Bruce. I'd like to light a candle of joy for your bringing this message to us. I didn't know there was an eighth principle. And I will hope that we'll know soon how to meet with you and Paula if you're still meeting. It would give me great joy to be able to join that endeavor. But for now, I have a joy that you've come today and told us about it. And I have a candle of sorrow for all that you related in that metaphorical video that you shared. It was very powerful. And thank you for letting us record it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others? Okay, let's take just a moment of silence. Spirit of community in which we share and find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts towards one another, seeking to hold in our hearts all of the joys and sorrows, both spoken and unspoken. Let us open our minds and hearts to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for healing of pain, and the soft, gentle coming of love. Now, Molly will lead us in a benediction.
For the benediction, I will read these words by the famous African-American Paul Robeson, who was a singer, diplomat, stage and film actor, an athlete, and an activist. Sorrow will one day turn to joy. All that breaks the heart and oppresses the soul will one day give place to peace and understanding, and everyone will be free.
And here is our postlude. I hope it is.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did disappear. The hour I first believed, through many dangers, toils and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures.
Well, my friends, that's the end of our service for today. I'm going to stop the recording now.